you are having a meaningful Yom Kippur thus far. I'm Rabbi Lori Rice, and I'm joined by a host of truly terrific individuals. I'm going to introduce them to you in just a moment. But first, let me welcome my colleague and partner in crime, Julie Greenberg, our education director here at Congregation Micah, for co-hosting this webinar panel opportunity today on Yom Kippur. It's a tradition now, I would say, probably about 4 years or 5 here at Micah to offer a panel on what we hope will be a provocative and interesting topic on Yom Kippur afternoon. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in and introduce our guests today, and then we'll take you more into our topic. So I'm going to start with Gerald. Gerald Brown is currently CEO of his own consulting firm, but that's fairly new. Prior to that, Gerald was CEO of Dismas House of Nashville. That, I think, was since January of 2016. And for those of you that don't know, the mission of Dismas House is to foster community awareness and understanding of the challenges and obstacles that formerly incarcerated men face upon re-entry by providing a system for personal transformation and growth as they transition back into society. You probably know that by heart, Gerald. With nearly 2 decades of experience in the nonprofit sector, Gerald has helped thousands of people in underserved communities throughout Middle Tennessee, throughout this area. And prior to Dismas House, he served as executive director for the Nashville Salvation Army, and basically just has a wealth of experience in the nonprofit sector here in Middle Tennessee. So Gerald, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Reverend Becca Stevens is an author, speaker, Episcopal priest, social entrepreneur, just all around super cool woman. She is founder and president of Thistle Farm here in Nashville. She also is founder of Magdalene in 1997. And the enterprise of Magdalene and Thistle Farms is to heal, empower, and employ female survivors of human trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. And Becca has this radical and crazy idea that love is the strongest force for change in the world, and I happen to think that she is right. So thank you, Becca, for being with us.
And I'm also your friend.
And you're my friend, as is Gerald. I am delighted to have both of you. And honestly, I would say yes to taking the time on this Monday. And I'm just going to say that Judy Friedenthal is a new friend, because even though I've heard her name probably for about 15 years since I moved here, we've not had a chance to spend time together. But let me introduce Judy. So I think it was in 1969 that a group of young lawyers came together to establish what then was called the Rap House. And it was a simple community center for runaway teens and youth struggling with addictions. And now, all these years later, the Rap House has evolved into the Oasis Center, where nearly 4,000 youth and families turn for help and direct support every single year. And Oasis Center provides a wide range of opportunities that reflect the diverse needs of youth and their families, from crisis intervention to youth leadership and community engagement to college and career access. And so Judy is the Vice President of Youth Engagement and Action and External Evaluation for the Oasis Center. And their work is rooted in evidence-based principles of positive youth development and trauma-informed care. So Gerald and Becca and Judy, thank you very, very much for joining Julie and I today. About to turn it over to Julie, but I want to tell you where we got this idea to come together, and that's that Julie and I were thinking about and talking about the book of Jonah a few months ago. One, that's just kind of what we do in the office, talk about different biblical books all the time. And Julie and I started thinking about, what did we want our Yom Kippur panel to look like? And traditionally, in the Yom Kippur service, the afternoon service on this holy day, we read the book of Jonah. Jews all over the world read the book of Jonah on this day. And Jonah is such an interesting and unique book in our canon. It's really one of the shortest books of the Bible, but it's also one of the most mysterious and morally ambiguous. Who is this prophet Jonah who is running from God and hiding at the bottom of the ocean? And why does he struggle with God's mission to save and forgive Israel's enemies? Why is that so hard for him to figure out and wrap his head around? And the time that Jonah spends in the fish is really essential, or the whale. Sometimes we know the story is Jonah and the whale. But it's really essential for spiritual development. And we're never going to know exactly what that fish or whale symbolized for Jonah, but we can look for the fish in our own lives, right? We can ask, was there a time when we were down or when we literally could not breathe and someone lifted us up? When we needed a place of refuge and someone sheltered us? And we can ask ourselves, when is it that we can serve as the fish, the place of refuge for someone else who's tossed overboard? How do we ensure that those who cannot breathe can in fact catch their breath? These are some of the questions that the five of us will ponder together over the course of this hour. And I think powerfully and poignantly, we see God repentant and remorseful in this story. And in a world where billions of people live in poverty and orphans are put into slavery and widows are raped, one can relate only to a God who cries and suffers alongside us. And I think the book of Jonah comes to remind us that divine brokenness accompanies the journey of human brokenness, and only together can we heal. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Julie.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi. Yes, we do. We sit around and talk about prophets and texts a lot around here. And I feel especially lucky, as much as I savor the opportunity to participate in adult education offerings as often as possible. I feel the luckiest of all because the majority of my professional time is spent with students of all ages. And I think anyone who's been a parent or a teacher or just had the good fortune of spending time with kids, you know, they are the best theologians of all. And so my particular approach to Jonah this year has come also out of some conversations we've been having with our teenagers about Jonah as a reluctant prophet, things, you know, sometimes in life that we are feel called, but are not sure we're ready to answer that call. And we also really looked at it in the context of quarantine and this collective but very isolating experience that many of us have been having. And so, you know, our conversation with them also really looked at this idea of, you know, or question, is Jonah depressed? You know, when he can't kind of put his eye on the shore and he's probably physically and spiritually feeling seasick during the storm, he chooses to sleep. You know, and so anyway, that was a real enlightenment for me to kind of start this endeavor as well. And whenever I'm talking with students about prophets, I love to share what I call the best job description definition of a prophet, which is someone who comforts the afflicted and also afflicts the comfortable. So I think we'll keep that in mind too as we spend this time together. And so again, thank you to all of you for joining us from Micah and beyond. And I'm going to just do a quick screen share. Most of the time we will spend in conversation, but I, when thinking about texts, often like to kind of invite you to close your eyes first and kind of get a visualization of the story of Jonah to the best of your recollection. It may have been a long time since you thought about Jonah, even though as Jews, we talk about him every year on this day. So I invite you to just sort of close your eyes and see what you can conjure in your mind. What visual comes to your mind when we think about Jonah? And as you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen. And then invite you to come back with us. And the first thing we see here is actually a Jewish congregation on Yom Kippur in the belly of a natural history museum. And you can see the skeleton of the Dag Gadol, the great whale or the great fish above them. which I think none of us can be together collectively this year, but I love that image. And then I'm just also going to share with you a few artistic depictions of Jonah. And some of them may match up, right? This sort of more traditional Gothic oil portraiture approaches to Jonah. This one I was delighted to find because I love to think about different cultures, Eastern cultures also enjoying this very cornerstone of Western storytelling. You can imagine this on the floor of an ancient synagogue. I love the color of this. And then maybe last, but certainly not least, I think for a lot of us, right, we kind of revert back to experiencing Jonah as a children's story. However, so whatever came to your mind, I think that it's really nice to come together and re-examine and consider what is, to Rabbi Lori's point, what is really relevant about this to us as adults today. And with that, I would love to, we're going to have 3 basic prompts, and I'm sure that we will explore beyond the basics of these questions. But the first one, and I'm going to invite Gerald to jump in with us first. And we've sort of divided this up. We called this session Finding Our Way. But the first question is really about finding your way. And we would love to hear from our 3 panelists. How did you come to your current work, and what is most rewarding about it for you? Because without a doubt, it is challenging work that you all do. And so, Gerald, without further ado, we'd love to toss that to you.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that.
Yes.
I think I've burst into my current work through my own personal experiences, which have dated from coming from a single parent household in the inner city of Memphis, Tennessee, and learning that I don't have to be a product of my environment. With strong faith in the support system, I found that there's a way to really kind of go out of what your environment is. And I think that spurred my heart for helping people. It spurred my heart to go into nonprofit work. Now, I think I took a detour in getting there. I went to school to play football and further educate myself, thinking that I was going to go play professional sports and use that platform to kind of give back and be a beacon of hope. But as I tell people, I never got that contract for the NFL. But I always had the heart to give. And since then, I've been in nonprofit for 23 years. And as you guys mentioned at the onset, I've been working with Dismas for the last 4 or 5 years, really helping out men who are transitioning out of incarceration with support service and faith development and spiritual guidance, so they can better themselves and find their way. And so I think so many of my experiences are related to that, and I try to be the voice of the voiceless.
Beautiful. Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Well, I think you're remarkable, and I know your work at Dismas has been amazing and incredibly impactful. You've launched now into a field where you're consulting Dismas, but other nonprofits who are looking to serve our community and beyond. I mean, what's so rewarding about that work for you that you've even made that move?
Well, I think it was just an opportunity to say, they see a lot of nonprofits that need mission structure, and because some nonprofits go mission drift, and really diving in what their mission is and see what we can do to kind of amplify that. Long and the short, to better serve the clients that they serve or the purpose that they're there, and really help them better serve. I mean, there's no cookie cutter approach to it other than just trying to help others that need help.
Lovely. I would like to add, for the benefit of anyone who's not familiar with Dismas as a biblical character, or not a biblical character, but he, when Jesus was crucified, there were 2 other men on either side, and Dismas was the one to his right, the penitent thief. And this is often why, back to art and thinking about depictions, when you see Jesus on the cross, his head is often inclined to the right to sort of suggest an inclination toward an alleged criminal who at least is penitent. And the name, though, is Greek for sunset. And I think that just really struck me today in considering this, because Jewish holidays, Jewish days start at night. They start when the sun sets. And I thought it was a really beautiful metaphor, given the work that you do, that you all at the Dismas House does. That at sunset, when the dark is coming and we are often fearful, that this is also the time for actually a new day. So great. Judy?
I just want to say that I've heard that. I've been ordained 30 years and never heard that in my whole life, of why Jesus' head moves to the right.
Well, there you go.
I don't know about that.
I love it. I think it's such a beautiful interpretation.
It is so pretty. It's beautiful.
Awesome.
Great. So Judy, if you would like to go ahead, we'd be so grateful.
Yes. So what prepared me for the work that I do at Oasis Center, I would say, was my Jewish life growing up here in Nashville. First with my family, I got a heavy dose of why we need to mend the world and how to mend the world. Because my parents were German Jews who escaped Nazi Germany. And so I knew before the book came out that bad things happen to good people, and that it happens when people in authority abuse power and nobody does anything about it. And why I'm here and many others are here was because there was resistance, and because there were allies, and because not everybody stayed neutral, because that would have been complicit. But defeating the notion of an Aryan master superior race was really important. And then at the same time, I was growing up here in Nashville, knowing that we had racial injustices happening that was being led by students who are just blocks away from Oasis Center and blocks away from where I live off of Jefferson Street. That Nashville really was the center of the kind of intellectual and the strategies, the logistics of the movement that inspired even Martin Luther King when he came to Nashville. So knowing that students could change the world is in the DNA in Nashville, and that's in the same DNA at Oasis Center. We view youth as agents of social change, and our hope is to help them beat the odds and then change the odds for all. But I had wonderful Jewish role models, truthfully, about how to be an ally. The National Council of Jewish Women were standing up at the lunch counters, and my mother joined them. My father and cousin Ernest Freudenthal were in the first integrated men's club. The Schweids, who owned Mills Bookstore, who were my first employers, had the first integrated staff downtown when they hired their cleaning woman to be their bookkeeper. And doctors who were Jewish were setting up integrated practices and getting death threats, but they did it, and we went to them. So that there were very strong examples. And then just getting a chance to be a counselor in training at the Jewish Community Center my sophomore year in high school. I was paired with Gus Kuhn, who was also somebody who was in college, and when grapes were being served, we taught the first grade boys about the boycott that was in play for poor migrant workers' rights. And they chose, in solidarity, we're not going to eat the grapes. But and Perry Wallace was hired to be our coach, and he broke the SEC basketball barrier, integrating it. And so people were put before us that helped us know what to do to mend the world. I'll say my favorite moment was when my two lives came together, and a camp called Our Town, which was an intergenerational camp to fight bias, bigotry, and racism, was going to fail because we didn't have enough registered. So I asked my mom if she would go with me, and she did. And there we do the privilege line, which is a real graphic depiction of take a step forward or back on circumstances that were in your childhood that you had nothing to do with. You just were born into them. Well, my mom and the Black males and the Muslim male were all in the back of the line. They got to know each other. It built a beautiful kind of beloved community. And because a picture is worth 1,000 words, I'm going to share. I hope you, well, I don't know if you can see this.
Yes.
Anyway, selfies had just started, and she was in many of them with folks. But after that, she started adding a section when she gave talks to adults or youth about her story of coming over on reparations, and said even the Germans paid reparations to her, and should we consider that for the treatment of Black people and Native Americans?
Thank you so much, Judy.
Mm-hmm.
And Becca, please share with us your journey as well. Oh,
can hear you.
Unmute you.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I love it. I love hearing people's stories, and I always think you fall in love when you really listen to a story and feel like there's a way for us to be together and to connect. And, you know, my whole life is a story about both the beauty and brokenness of community. I'm my mother and father's daughter. My mom was the executive director at St. Luke's Community Center, helping kids in the nations growing up. My dad was an Episcopal priest who was killed by a drunk driver when I was 5. And we were in such a dysfunctional community. Our church was so awfully dysfunctional. There's so much to talk about. I'll leave all that for later, or you can read a book. But, you know, when I went off to college, they demolished that church building, and it was the best thing that they could have done in my life. It's like I don't have to go back to those haunted grounds where my sexual abuse started at about the age of 6. You know, it was gone. In the Christian tradition, they have this ceremony where you deconsecrate the land where a church has been. And I thought, this is just ridiculous. It was, you know, it was desecrated for years. And, you know, I always knew I was my mother and father's daughter, that I loved God and I loved community and I wanted to build something better. So I got ordained in the Episcopal tradition. But I always knew the real goal for me was to begin offering real sanctuary, real safety and home for women who had survived way much more than I could imagine. And I came back to Nashville to go to divinity school at Vanderbilt and met my husband, who was a country music artist at the time. He's still my husband, but he's not a country music artist. And we got married and we started Thistle Farms. I really started at about 95. But we opened our house in 97. But really the whole journey was about wanting to believe if we were a really loving community without judgment, that people would heal. And I believe it's so much more now. I mean, this is not my current job. I've had the same jobs since I was in my 20s. And that makes me really happy that I keep growing the same job into a global movement for women's freedom. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just doing it on a different scale. That's all I got.
Lenny.
I'm a little bit humbled by the company I'm keeping this hour. Well, I'm going to guide you into the second question, and maybe we'll just kind of continue. You know, at this point, I feel like we can continue in the same order. If one of you is feeling more eager than another, feel free to jump in. I think we're small enough we can do that and respond to each other as well. We don't have to be as formal. So I'm just going to throw this out there and we'll have at it. But this is now, Julia mentioned, you know, the book of Jonah is about finding our way. This first question that she proposed was finding your way. This is about finding their way. So how does transformation work in your organization? And what, in your experience, does it take for somebody to actually grab hold of the proverbial life jacket? Because that doesn't always happen. So
I can jump in and then I'll be quiet.
No.
So what I love about, listen, first of all, every time you talk, Laurie, I learn something so much and I'm so grateful to it. So thank you for even just leading us on that meditation at the beginning. I'm grateful for that. The other thing is I think there's a movement in all of the not-for-profit world that we're moving from hero to host.
Can you explain that? What do you mean?
So back in the day, we were all heroes. Like you go rescue women from the streets or rescue the kids or rescue the men out of prison. And now really people are beginning to understand the best thing you can do is be a host so people get to be the hero of their own story. So if we're the whale, Joan is the hero of the story. We never think of the whale as the hero. And you just illustrated it so beautifully that all of us as community are the whale, and then Jonah gets to be the hero. And I think that's a transformational way of understanding our work as activists and community members, that everybody gets to be a hero. We don't need to come in and think, you know, here's my cape, let's go, let's go. You know, it's like, I can provide you the time and the space and the resources to honor your story and to be an advocate so that whatever the tools you need while you're in this whale, you can find, so that you can find this, you know, real safety and new life to go continue your heroic journey as you figure it out.
Gerald and Judy, I want you to feel free to jump in. I would imagine, Becca, that and for everyone, that not everybody feels like they could be even a hero. Don't even see themselves as having heroic potential.
Yeah.
I understand.
Go ahead, Gerald.
I'm sorry, Judy. My mother raised me right, so I can defer. You know, I was raised in the South. But I just feel compelled, just based on what Becca was saying, as being the host. I've found throughout my career a lot of people who struggle, and we all struggle at some point in our lives, but depending on the time of the day, it could be every day. We struggle and feel most comfortable when somebody is there for us. And a lot of people that I've served throughout the course of my career, if you date back to their lives, there's a lot of trust there. There's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of insecurities there. And I've always found before I can help anyone, I just want to be their friend. I want them to know it's a non-judgmental zone that they're in. And I try to treat that as the culture of every organization that I've been a part of, that we should first be friends. We should first be a beacon of hope for them when they don't see one. And then let's work together on what's their best journey and help them get there if they choose to do so. I've always said you can try to help somebody as much as you want, but they have to come to their truth and what their journey is, and let's see if we can get there together.
Yeah, and I would say too, Oasis sees it that we add nutrients near to the soil, like the developmental nutrients needed for a young person to evolve and explore their best selves. And our secret sauce is actually service learning. And through that, I mean, we have 21 different programs where you can walk through the crisis door and be an emergency shelter, or the leadership door, but you're gonna have access to all 21 services and the 4 impact areas that we think are essential. And the first is safety, the next one's belonging, and then participation and empowerment, and then generosity and justice. And that opportunity to handle real world problems. Our young people think about what issue they care about in the community and then design a service project around it and learn all the social emotional learning skills and leadership skills by being on a team with people who are different, learning how to communicate, problem solve, set goals, celebrate the outcome. And we know that young people, we like to say, they need an experience, not an explanation. And that's what service is. And as Martin Luther King said, anyone can be great because anyone can serve. And through that, young people learn about the social constructs that are out there that are impacting their lives. They're working on solving the problems that institutions that are problems for them. So they are empowered, they learn to use their voice with support, They become activists, and exposure to things and feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. One young person put it, it's his church, to get to go to Building Bridges camp. And one thing we know about trauma, which many of our marginalized youth are experiencing, is that if trauma is not transformed, it is transferred. And that hurt people hurt people. And it is the work for generations that we do this work now.
Yeah.
Because violence happens when you don't know what else to do with your suffering and sorrow.
Yeah.
Preach, Judy, preach. Amen.
Gerald, did you say, and maybe I just didn't hear correctly, that sometimes when you are supported, it's when you struggle the most? Did I make that up?
No, I may have just stumbled over my words, but I think people don't feel, in my experience in working with justice impacted individuals, at-risk youth, they have to trust you to tell their deepest, darkest secrets so we can get to the core of what that trauma is, what that ACE might be. And once that trust and rapport is there, you'll be more open to say, I was molested as a youth, or I was affected by seeing drugs and prostitution in my neighborhood, or it really hurt me that my father left my mommy. And let's unpack that so we can say, how can we move on together? And that support system is what I've seen over the course of my career that's been so beneficial to the clients that we've served. And especially at Dismiss, it's near and dear to my heart. I think God was forming me over the years to prepare me to serve at Dismiss, because my father was incarcerated for 20 years. And I never met the man because he was incarcerated. And my mom since moved away from where they first met. And so I think all the things that I was being groomed to do and love on people for was all just kind of poured into Dismiss House. And I think that's one of the reasons that Dismiss House is so special of a nonprofit is because it's family. We start with family. Let's build that family atmosphere and let's build from there.
I love that, Gerald. I love the idea that, the brokenness that we knew just readies the heart for loving people. That's the biggest gift I found in this whole world. And I think it's true what we're all saying, which is we criminalize people who are trauma survivors. That's what we criminalize, and we criminalize being poor, and we criminalize being Black, or we criminalize being, from a single parent. Whatever we do, we, for the women that I serve for, again, decades at Thistle Farms, I've never been working alongside any of the women who haven't been raped. Zero out of 23 years, and I just think about, sometimes it's like people talk about people have choices and stuff. And I think, if you're choosing at 14 to be a runaway, or you're choosing to be on the streets dealing drugs and selling your body, what the hell were the options if that's the choice?
Right.
And I'm so only interested in knowing, for me at least, is like, even if they raped you, even if they incarcerated you, even if they addicted you, whatever happened, do you still just remember what the hope was in the belly of the whale? Mm-hmm. And if you have that memory, I will go with you for 15, 20 years. I'll walk down the road with you forever to find that and be a part of it.
Bless your heart and your soul. You are your parents' children back there.
When Julie and I were sitting and talking about this session, which, by the way, has already completely surpassed my expectations for depth and awesomeness, but we were looking together at one of David Brooks' books, The Second Mountain, because he has this quote in there, which, of course, Julie, I think it's in your office, not mine, so I can't grab it from behind me, where he talks about when you dig out, when either you dig out or is dug out from you a crevice in your soul, either trauma induced or otherwise, it also leaves a vast crevasse to be filled with love and goodness and joy. Your capacity for that just becomes that much richer and deeper. I was almost like jealous reading that, thinking, God, maybe I need more trauma in my life so I can have more joy and hope and promise. And But just that rings so true what you say, Becca, about, if you can still tap into like what that might have been like, if there's like a spark of it even there, then I will hold your hand and be your partner. However long it takes, we'll get you back there. But I do think it's just, I imagine some of us even on this, I hope that some of us on this webinar right now are thinking about the times where perhaps because something scared us, or we thought, wow, that looks too familiar in the mirror, or I don't want to walk down that path, that instead we othered it by criminalizing it and saying there must be something wrong, or why couldn't they pull themselves up by the bootstraps like I did, or but why didn't they make a better choice like I did? And we really need to think long and hard about the times in which we say that. So.
Well, and I think the pandemic is the perfect time to have that conversation. The middle of a pandemic where, we have been crying out as a nation, we can't breathe. And there's a million different reasons we can't breathe. And part of it is the horrific injustices. And part of it is, that we're trying to breathe from behind masks that are suffocating. And part of it is there's fires, so the air quality is so bad that nobody can breathe. And there's all these, injustices that people are just waking up into for whatever reason. They're waking up into it now. And I think it is a beautiful time to call up compassion. And to say, okay, I'm in with you. Let's go. Let's do this. And conspire. And I love that the word conspire just means I'll breathe with you. I'm just going to breathe with you. As you are struggling to breathe, I will breathe with you. And as I'm struggling to breathe, if people aren't grieving, they are not paying attention. Yes. There's plenty to grieve. We're at 205,000 deaths. We're at, full capacity in prisons still, in spite of this, where nobody can even go visit their relatives, and there's all kinds of stuff. But I just think
all kinds of stuff
to say, like, what's going to carry us through is love. That is what is going to carry us through. And I'm talking about radical, deep, hard love. I think that's what I think.
What we see among our youth is their resiliency in the midst of trauma and COVID and virtual learning and so forth. Still, their resilience and their generosity around wanting to give back, when literally, if they gave back what the community gave them, you wouldn't want it. And yet they still say, I want to give back, and they want to do service. And they're putting their voices on the line and finding out that they have something to work on together, whether it's through groups working on restorative practices in schools, so that exclusionary discipline doesn't continue, to kick out young Black males in particular into the school to prison pipeline, or working for getting the voter registration up. Our Mayor's Youth Council kids increased voting registration by 80% 2 years in a row. It was very low, so it was easy to do, but they're doing things and finding that they have impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think the uniqueness of it all, as Becca mentioned, is without Oasis, Thistle Farms, and Dismas House and others like ours to be that well, the kids at Oasis House wouldn't have that opportunity to be resilient. What about the kids that are out in that jurisdiction or can't be there? How are they going to be able to have that safe haven to have to show that resiliency that they could potentially have? Laura, I think we just kind of took the question and just started talking to each other. Julie, Lori, is there another question to talk about?
There's another question, but Julie, before you give the third prompt, when y'all were speaking, I was thinking about, there is, Becky, you said there's so much, and there is so much. And I think about in my own family, a conversation I was having where, I had family members saying, I'm so upset about the rioting. And I remember saying, yes, and you should be really upset about why we're even rioting. And that is that like deep love. Deep love means asking a lot of really deep questions, not this layer, but it's like 10 leagues down. we got a lot of uncovering to do, and we're digging still. So, Julie.
Yeah, one of our young men, Eli, who's a juvenile court referred youth, for his service project this summer, because he can't do things in person, did a little Instagram video, it's on our site, about what he wants to come from the protests, and hoping that everybody asks themselves, what do you want to change in your life and in your community? What do you want to see come out of the protests, and set those intentions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Judy, I have been thinking about your students a lot over the summer as well, and how, just kind of curious how your work and just the logistics of it has been impacted, as we all have. So, and I will take just a second to say at the end today, we will be sure to invite everyone who is participating to learn more and explore online all three of these organizations, and how we can be active participants and contributors to the amazing work you do. So we do have one more official prompt, but
Before you ask that question, can I just say one quick thing?
Please.
Is that my hope, and what I love about the whole journey of a day of not eating and focusing on justice and our work, is that it reminds us that we want, all of us are hoping that justice is part of our way of life. It's not something like we have to do for Dismiss or Thistle Farms or Oasis or whatever. Those are beautiful things to do, but the more like how we spend our whole lives is that journey of justice, and how it's in our thoughts, it's in our food. That's what, this whole day is about, is to remember how it's so connected. And that's what I'm really trying to learn during this season for me too, is just like, how can I just make justice a way of life in my life? Like it is, it's my worship. It's my parenting style. It is all of the things, it is what tea I drink. It is what shoes I wear. Anyway, I'll leave it alone.
No.
Please don't. I know in the context of the work I do and we do here at Micah, especially with our bar and bat mitzvah candidates, they are all encouraged to do a mitzvah project, but we're really trying to get them to exercise those muscles to be just that, more than a mitzvah moment, more than just a check that you write, as great as checks are.
I wasn't discouraging anyone from writing a check.
Of course not. But truly, it's the work for all of us. And segueing into the sort of final formal thought about finding our way, I think, the challenge and the opportunity is to underscore Torah and make it relevant, or invite the students to see the relevancy and make connections for themselves with a really ancient, earthy text, right? And to question it. That is, to me, one of the greatest gifts of the Jewish tradition, is to really be commanded to question, right? To wrestle, to be God wrestlers, Yisrael. And so I think it's such a gift we're given in Torah, in our scripture, that we have these flawed characters, right? And they're very relatable as such. It would be really boring to read otherwise, I think. And so we were, looking at this idea, and that, and Rabbi Lori mentioned it sooner, maybe it's really hard to have the capacity to see yourself in a heroic light, or to see yourself as deserving of second or third or fourth chances. And I know in the context of the work you all do, that in the criminal justice system, this word recidivism, that is, we know what it means, but I'd love to invite any and all of you to kind of talk about how you support others when there is a metaphorical or actual fall from grace, or backsliding, how does that work, or any personal anecdotes you want to share around that to help us help others?
Because can I just add, Julie, that you said that so beautifully, but I'm thinking about Jonah, like,
Yeah.
he's not just flawed, he's annoying. It's like, you cannot shake it at, like, Jonah, we're trying to help you out, and you are just, you're not, you cannot see that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Becca said it best as far as loving one another. I think through unconditional love is you can get through a little bit of that annoyance or tolerate that annoyance more so than you would otherwise. And knowing that, I think long and the short, if your heart is in the right place when dealing with somebody else that's struggling, it will shine through. It will help guide through that situation. And sometimes when the time is right, they will come back to you. But I think all in all, it's just really putting forth the type of love and support that's needed to overcome any type of obstacle, as Jonah did in the belly of the whale.
And I'll say that we have a restorative mindset and do restorative practices, but like Brian Stevenson says, each of us is better than the worst thing we've ever done. And that we can really hold each other accountable more using restorative practices than punitive, where you really own what you've done. We do circles. I know Thistle Farm just does too. But I guess one example I'll share of the importance of this perspective was a mother who had lost custody of her 3 kids. She was struggling, and you got to figure out what were the options to her, like Becca said. But she worked hard and got these 3 kids back, but she got them back as teenagers, when it's actually the hardest to try and reconstitute a family, when it's your job to kind of question limits and boundaries and rules. And so they were in counseling with us. And one of them was college going age and first generation. And we have a college access program he got involved in, and the ripple effects from the counseling and then college. Well, the next sibling, when they were ready, came through, then the next. And then if the mother didn't come in and say, okay, it's my turn, and she went on to college. You just got to figure people are doing the best they can, and then provide them with the supports and opportunities so that they can make other choices.
Yeah, and I think thank you for that. And all of us probably have a million stories of folks who, came through and then decided they need to leave for a while and then come back, and then leave for a little bit and then come back. And, that's part of our journey. But sometimes for us, the sad thing is the women don't come back. They've been murdered on the streets, or the drugs get them, or they go back to incarceration, and we don't see them for, forever or a long time or anything like that. But early on, I have so many success stories of women who left and then they came back. They're running departments. They're amazing. They're all that and more. And I treasure every one of those. But I think really I want to remember, especially on Yom Kippur. Can you tell me what Kol Hadad means? Kol
Kol HaKavod means all the honor.
Oh,
good job is what it means.
And today I want to give my Kol HaKadoy to a woman named Peggy Sue who died. This is years ago. And, she never made it very far into the program at all. And when I met her, she was in state custody. When I re-met her, she was in state custody, chained to a bed at General Hospital. She weighed 85 pounds and had a feeding tube and was chained to the bed. It was very, very humbling. And Peggy Sue shares the story of so many of the women that were abused early on, just, poverty, racist communities in Nashville. broken families, all of it. Anyway, she was a Baptist, so she knows scripture a lot better than I do. You know, she made fun of me because she didn't really even think I was Christian. But I would go sit with her at the hospital bed, and she would quote scripture to me and tell me and try to teach me. And she kept saying, all I want to do is come home. That's all I want. I just want to be able to come home. And when she died, you know, there was nobody there for her. So we got her ashes in a cardboard box, and I did a little service. And I've been ordained, you know, for 30 years, but that was probably the most nervous I ever was, because I felt like it was a whole failure. I felt like it was a failure on all of our parts. All of us were inadequate, including herself or whoever. I mean, systems, people, family, school systems, synagogues, churches, all of it. And the brokenness of the world kind of landed on her back. And there was only like 5 of us that organized a little memorial and did it for her. And I just started off saying, you do a prayer, you do this, and we'll bury this poor woman. And the first words came out of someone's mouth, and we all started weeping, and no one could speak. And I've never had that experience before or after of love was so thick you couldn't cut through it, and that when there was nothing else, there was God. And that if there ever was a chariot that came for anybody, it came for her. And if there was ever anybody that was rescued from the belly of the whale, it was her. She has taught me more than just about any theologian, any preacher, anybody, that until the end, she still had this vision of what home might look like. And so today, I want to remember not just the people that are traditionally what we think of as overcomers or heroes, but also those who died in the struggle, and we still love them and learn and cherish from them all the gifts that we've been given in love.
Thanks for sharing that story, Becca.
You're welcome, Gerald.
Becca, you know, today we also say Yisker. That's several times a year. We have a memorial service for all the people who've left our world and left an indelible mark on it in doing so. And that service for us is at 5 today, and we will definitely be including Peggy Sue and really all those who I'm so grateful had 5 to weep for her, but deserved many more and shouldn't have been there then anyway. So thanks for sharing that story.
You're welcome.
Julie.
Yes. Yeah.
I know we have a lot of time left, and we don't like to burden people with going over an hour on Zoom, but I thought maybe if there was either a wrap up on your end, or if there was a question you felt we should address from our participants.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a phrase that I learned from my father, actually, that said, who was a psychiatrist, but he said, you know, when life hurts, let it. I mean, I do think there's a discomfort that, or a readiness we all feel to mask or distract. And I think that is also the gift of the great fish. It is the process and the opportunity to be with it. And when you're sharing Peggy Sue's story, Becca, you know, when you want to come home, that's it. You want to be back on dry land. That is really the end of the metaphor we were sort of after today. And so I just feel really incredibly grateful for the work that you all do in this community for so many. And like our work here, I just want to encourage everyone to answer that prophetic job description, right? To comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, which we have some opportunities to do every day, and certainly upcoming. And no, I don't see any questions in the chat. Thank you all for participating. And I just, that's all for me. Rabbi, if you have anything else you want to say. Grateful for the time.
I think as we look into a new year, which, you know, most of the world has to wait for 2021, but here we are at 5781, and I say let's grab a new year while we can. No sooner the moment will be appreciated. That we can all be prophets for justice in every moment. To all your points and to what Becca said about let it be the tea we drink and the shoes we wear. And, you know, it's normal for each and every one of us to have a moment of distraction, but we're in a time, I like to say a myth busting moment, where we want to take the myth of what was in the good old days, which turns out weren't so good for everybody, and blaze a new trail. So I hope we can all be hosts. Thank you for showing us how to do that work.
Yes.
Judy and Gerald and Becca. Thank you for being our friends and our guides. And we look forward to holding hands and linking arms with you and with so many others, the 70 plus of you that joined us today, to make this world in 5781 a whole lot better than it's been for everyone.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Throat.
So,
May it
good
be.
luck with everyone.
Thank you.